Hey friends, just a quick reminder before we get into today's episode, come join us over on our Patreon. That's where we release bonus episodes every other week, and we've already got over 20 episodes from 2023 that you can download and binge right now for as little as $3 a month. We've covered so many good books there, Haunting Adeline, Chateau, Gothicana, and so many more. That's also where we'll cover any books in a series we continue, so Serpent and Dove, High Mountain Court, Serpent and the Wings of Night. You can continue those series with us on Patreon right now. Finally, as a patron, we let you know what we're going to read every month, so you can read along with us if that's your jam. Anyway, that's all from me. On to today's episode.
It's such a cliche of his, like, tough, cold, icy exterior. She's the only one that melts it, but she's also, like, fiery, but also really wounded. Like, it's so fucking cliche, but it's so good.
She's so fiery and also really wounded. Yeah, I mean, the damsel in distress thing is, like, very good in this.
It is. Like, I was so, and we'll talk about it in this part, but I was so here for him punishing her dad. Like,
oh my God. The best who did this to you. I don't need to ask because he signed his work. I fucking died.
That was so fucking good. And that's the thing. Like, I will go through parts, and a lot of my notes are, like, rage notes. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? What the fuck is here? I hate this. I hate his name. I hate everyone here. And then I'm like, oh my God, swoon.
Yeah, the fact that this dude's name is Winter, I can't fucking stand. Somehow I'm still gonna read it again tonight.
I know, literally. Somehow I'm still like, okay, cool. Can we record this so that I can go read it and know what happens?
Welcome to Your Safe Space, the podcast your partner, friends, parents, whoever thinks is dirty. Don't have time to read books? Want to understand the jokes and the TikToks? We got you, fam. We're the Spice Traders, and we deal in spicy books. I'm Katie, and I need it to make sense.
I'm Liz, and I'm hypercritical. As always, we start every episode with 3 things. The first is a generic trigger warning. You can find specific triggers for this book in our show notes, so please check those out. Also, we do use foul language and talk a lot about sex. If you have sensitivity to any of this, please give this episode a skip.
Secondly, we talk about books. The whole book, nothing but the book, so help me goddess. If you plan to read this book and don't want something spoiled right now, don't listen to this episode.
Lastly, we acknowledge that a good book can hit you at the wrong time. The views expressed in our discussion are our opinion, and we absolutely don't want to diminish the work and the talent of the authors in our community. That said, we have some notes.
So Liz, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about The Winter King by C.L. Wilson. This was published in 2014, and it is the first in an ongoing series, the Weather Mages of Mistral series. There are currently 2 books out. This book is 594 pages long, and that's a chonker.
Boy,
which
is it.
We'll talk about also.
Yeah.
Also, I have to say, the chapters are very long.
They're very long. I don't really understand the breakup of the chapters either. It feels a little bit arbitrary.
Yeah, it's like she just wrote a book as a stream of consciousness and then just like split the pages wherever she wanted to split them.
Yeah.
Because as you'll say, we're covering 7 chapters today, but this is a chonker, so that's
It's
a solid
158
quarter
pages
of
or
the
something
book.
like that.
Yeah. So anyway, as usual, we need to talk about the cover. And this cover, I had to double check the publication year because this is not the cover of a book that was published in 2014.
I guess, girl, but that was 10 years ago.
Okay. It's just, all right, this cover is a very modest bodice ripper. So you have the man in his armor looking longingly at a woman in a very modest Arthurian wedding dress, and it's like snowy in the background.
Yep.
This book just, okay, do you remember in the public library, they had those like spinny things that had all the bodice ripper paperbacks on them that have clearly been read a million times? This should be on there.
Yeah, that's definitely the vibe that it has. And it's got like It's like the mass market paper thing. It's like a New York Times bestseller, and then it's got like some like media review, just like one-liner about it. Like it's just very time and place. And I get what you're saying about like 2014 feels like it should be longer than 10 years ago, but like this feels like a 90s book.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it feels like it shouldn't be in the 2000s. Feels very 90s, late 80s. Like, it looks so classic bodice ripper, with the exception that they're both all clothed. And that was something in the start of this book too. In her acknowledgments, she says something like a thank you to the artist for like executing it, like to be modest or something like that. But I'm like, but girl, it's full of sex. Like, who are you fooling?
Yeah, who are you fooling? I think so. There's that. It's a heinous cover, but I think the thing that bothers me more about it, like if you're gonna go down that path, like it's a very well rendered bodice ripper cover. It's the art is pretty, right? It's not weird or anything like that, besides the fact that it just is weird. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, the characters don't match their descriptions in the book. They're both described as being like POCs. Like, these people are white.
These people are super white. Also, she doesn't have the gray streaks in her hair because, of course, she has weird fucking hair. And his hair isn't long and white.
Yeah, I mean, it's like blonde adjacent, dirty blonde. Yeah. And hers is just black. I mean, she looks like is it Mother Goyle from Rapunzel? Or
she
Tangled?
Does. Yeah. That's exactly what she looks like.
And he looks like Kristoff from Frozen, if we're going on the Disney theme here.
He does look like Kristoff.
But
so
I mean,
Kristoff and the evil mother from Tangled.
But when they're both described in the book, like they're both described as having like brown skin, not white skin.
No, which did confuse me about him because, as we will come to talk about, he is the Winter King. He is like the King of the North. Every time they talked about how golden his skin was, I was like, but why?
Yeah. Well, and
which
to
means
your
he
point,
must be POC.
Exactly. Well, yeah, but okay. I want to tread carefully here because I'm not trying to like be offensive here or anything, but they're not described as being tanned. Like, I feel like we have books with protagonists who are described as being tanned, but these people are very distinctly described as having like brown skin. And like, it's just not, I just don't understand why you would commission art that's just not that's incongruous with how you describe your characters.
Exactly. And because, like I said, there is some acknowledgments in the front where C.L. Wilson specifically like calls out the artist. So like they clearly worked together.
Right.
So why would you not want them to look like your characters?
Right. And to your point, I mean, even just smaller things, like he's described as having long hair in the book and this guy's got short hair. What the hell?
Right. Like there's just a lot of things missing in here.
Yeah. So the cover's a choice.
A choice was made. And that is my note. I was like, wow, this cover is really something, especially for a publication date of 2014.
Yeah.
Because it just feels wrong to me. It just feels wrong.
Feels wrong. This is definitely not a book that you could read the paperback like on public transportation and have people not know what you're reading.
No. Well, and I'm comparing it to like ACOTAR, which we just did, which was also published in the early 20-teens, if we're being honest. And
That's
that cover
true.
looks like it came from the 20-teens. Because I feel like this, because I think this is where I'm lumping it in. So like I'm looking at ACOTAR, The Hunger Games, where they're just very like bold like graphics. And this feels like it's from the early 90s.
Yeah, I do wonder how much of that has to do with like the publishing industry though, because like this and the dedication will give us more information on this, but like this was very clearly like a romance novel. And I'm not even sure like romantasy was like a hip thing or a category back then.
That's true. I don't think it was.
So I'm wondering if like this book was almost forced to have that cover.
Just to make it fit in the romance vibe. Yeah, I could see that. Also, we'll talk about the dedication, but it is in line with Christine Feehan's vibe as well.
It is. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not giving anything away to say that in the dedication it says for Christine Feehan. And it turns out C.L. Wilson and Christine Feehan are like biffs. And you can definitely tell in the writing.
Yes. And I was pretty excited about reading that.
I was too.
Because that was fine. Because I don't think I've seen a dedication to, I mean, we've read dedications to other authors, I'm sure, but they weren't authors that like, A, I recognized, or B, that we've also covered on this podcast. Because, hey, go check out a Dark One?
Prince. Dark Prince. There we go.
I was like, Dark Children.
So fun fact, I don't know why, but Dark Prince is still one of our most listened to episodes, and I could not tell you why.
I want to go back and listen to it because that blows my fucking mind.
Well, and okay, it strikes me, especially like in the TikTok crowd, like Christine Feehan is not talked about at all. You know,
she's never come up on my stream.
I don't know if people like just don't know what Dark Prince is. I don't know. It's so weird. But Christine Feehan still has like a warm place in my heart. Like we have to find a book that we like that we can recommend.
I know we need to. I do think we should try reading a newer one that's maybe not in that same series.
Yeah,
but she's got like a backlog of like 50 books, so we've got to find one.
There's got to be.
Maybe we'll switch. Maybe we'll switch one out for something in the new year.
Oh, that's
because it wouldn't be a sequel, so we could do it as a public release. Yeah, because we do have like 4 holes. Oh, those
4
are sequels,
holes
but whatever.
We can find more holes to fill. It's our
romance
specialty.
What a tagline.
Fill in your holes. Okay, anyway.
Fill in your holes since 2022.
Hey.
Whoa. All right. So, enough about that. Can't even say your name. Katie, kick it off, please.
Okay. So, we covered the dedication, but when I read that, I was like, girl, buckle up. I'm here for it. This book is on Kindle Unlimited, so it's worth a shot, even if it is almost 600 pages and, as you'll see, a little bit meandering, but I digress.
Yeah.
So
it's fine.
This is a chunker. We're going to divide it up into 4 parts. This is part 1, and so part 1 is going to cover chapters 1 through 7. So at the end of part 4 is when we're going to do our rating, so come along with us on this journey.
Please.
Ooh. And girl, I tried to keep this real short, but I've got 11 pages of notes, so this might be a little bit of a long one.
Listen, there's a lot. For a book that is so meandering and like really nothing happening, a lot happens. This book is a study in being contrary.
Contradictions?
Thank you. All I could think was juxtapositions, and I was like, that's not the right word.
Contradictions also is a great Hermione fanfic. Just putting it out there. Oh yeah. Okay. Light on the plot.
I don't need that. That's not what I'm here for.
Yeah, look, let's be honest. Anyway. So we get into the book and we start with a prologue. So this prologue's kind of long. So we'll start with the first part of the prologue, which is taking place in a place called Vera Sola in Summerlee. And we begin with Camsen Currisgate begging her brother Falcon not to leave her. Falcon is bound to Wintercraig to negotiate a treaty. A new treaty. It's not like they're at war or anything. They're just, they have an agreement. They want to update that agreement. Cam believes that this is special punishment for her sent from her father, King Verdon IV, whom she believes does not love her because her weather gifts are too dangerous and volatile.
She would be right.
It did take me a minute to figure out what the fuck they were talking about with weather gifts, but it's like magic that controls the weather. It's exactly what it sounds like.
She's Elsa.
No, the Winter King is Elsa.
You're right.
Something else. She's Elsa without the cold.
You're right. My initial 2 notes after the cover was, and I hate her name, and cool, yep. So she's Elsa.
Yeah,
and
I hate her name too.
Winter is Elsa. But I will say a note. Oh, man, this didn't transfer because I took a screenshot. But I was curious about her name because her name is Camsen, which I thought was stupid. But her name actually means something. Camsen is a word. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
It works for her. Camsen is actually a noun for an oppressive, hot, southerly or southeasterly wind blowing in Egypt in spring.
Specifically in Egypt. Okay.
And in spring.
Okay. Well, that makes it better, I guess.
But it doesn't, though, because she's like a storm wielder.
Okay, but I have a question about that. Like, her magic manifests as storms now, but is that just because she can't control it? Because we'll see later, which you haven't read, places where her powers manifest differently if she thinks about it. So
Interesting.
actually, I lied. We will see some of that in part 1, so I'll call it out when we
Oh,
get there.
yeah, we do. I do. No, yeah. Okay.
So because her father hates her, he's locked her away in her own corner of the royal palace, and she has no friends.
Got no friends. She's team no friends.
Got no friends. Falcon soothes Camden by saying that he'll write and that she'll have the company of her nursemaid Tilda Vera Greenleaf, or Tildy, and of course her older sisters, the seasons, spring, summer, and autumn. I read that and I was like, fuck that.
I know. I hated that so much. And those are not their given names. Those are their gift names.
Yeah,
Because
we don't actually
they
ever
have-
get their real names.
No, because it doesn't fucking matter.
Not in this book, at least.
But I have to tell you, every time the seasons were mentioned, every fucking time, even after we've met the Winter King, for whom this book is named, I was like, why is there not a winter? Why is Camden not winter?
Oh.
It
Wow,
bugs
you just
me.
made that connection for me. I did not get that before. I did have the thought of like, why are there only 3 seasons instead of 4? But I didn't make the like literally microscopic step toward, because it's the Winter King.
But that's why in my head when I first read this and we didn't really know about her powers, she was Elsa to me. So it was like, oh, well, she's the 4th sister. She's the 4th season.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, right? She's going to marry
she's
the Winter
not.
King.
Yeah, that's true. She is the Winter Queen.
This just like the idea of the seasons and like the 3 perfect sisters like just reminded me of like every like stepsister adjacent bullshit. I guess the only like savings grace here is that they are insufferable, but they're not mean. They're just useless.
They're just useless because they're very sweet, actually.
Yeah, and they love their sister. They're just useless.
They're just useless.
So Falcon says, you'll have these people, and she complains they aren't you.
Blech.
To which he says this thing that I just fucking hate. He says, quote, "Now there's a pretty compliment. Careful, my lady, you'll turn my head."
It's your brother.
Gross.
That's so gross. Also, what the fuck are you talking about, Falcon?
I will admit freely, I have no siblings, and so I don't know how they work, but it strikes me that seems very incestuous and just wildly inappropriate to say.
It's nothing I would say to my brother.
Nope. Ew, can you imagine?
Nope.
Yeah,
So it's very incestuous. But also, their relationship feels kind of incestuous-y because, like, he's the only one she likes. I don't know. It's weird. But also, then, maybe later in the book, but he ceases to exist. Like,
well, yeah, for a very good reason. But he does show up later in the book, so I guess pay attention to that. But, okay, the other thing about this is that I'm pretty sure, I'm like 80% sure, this is happening within 4 to 5 years of the events of the book, which means that Camden is at youngest 15. So for her to be like whining like this,
ew, that makes it even grosser. Yeah. I solidly thought that she was still like 17 for most of this book until we get her age, and I was like, oh.
because she feels younger.
She does feel younger. The way she acts is younger, for sure. But she's solidly 20.
So anyway, this makes Camden relent, saying that while Falcon's away, at least he'll be able to look for Blazing, the famous sword of the old king Roland Soldius, the hero of Summerlee from legend.
Wow.
But Falcon tells her that he doesn't have time for fairy tales. How stupid. Oh my gosh. And Camden's like,
Dumb girl.
That's odd because you've been so adamant before in the past that you are the one that's going to find the sword for many years. But she doesn't say anything out loud and she just kind of lets it go. So over to Gildenheim in Wintercraig.
Hate it.
We see the king, a man named Winter, and his brother Garrick, who are carving ice sculptures and discussing Elka, Winter's betrothed. Garrick is trying to convince his brother that Elka is more ambitious than she is in love with Winter, but Winter will hear none of it. Garrick tries once more to point out how much Elka flirts with Falcon, who has, we assume, arrived in Guildheim to do his work. And Garrett suspects that Elka might help Falcon get the Book of Riddles, which supposedly has the answer to where the sword blazing is hidden. But eventually he has to drop it because Winter won't be moved.
So this prologue did a thing that I was very worried that the whole book would do, and thank God it didn't. And I don't know, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, but it did this thing where, like, it would show you a conversation, right? Like the conversation that Falcon is having with Camson. And then it does that page break, and now it's like, it references itself, where it's like, it was 2 weeks ago that Falcon had talked to Camson, and I'm like, I just saw that. I know. I was there. And it does that in the prologue like 2 or 3 times, where it would have this like weird time shift, but then immediately reference itself. And it just felt really unnatural, and I hated it every time.
Yeah, and I think it was an effort in like orienting you in the fact that time is passing, but I wish it had just like not done that. Because we could infer that like, okay, Falcon said he was going to go to Wintercraig. Now he is in Wintercraig. Time has passed. Ergo.
Yeah. And I was trying to think of like, in my notes, how to articulate it, because I've read books where you could have an inner monologue of a character where it's like, it was 2 weeks since that conversation or whatever, but it's just the way that it's like written in the prose is very jarring, where it's literally like, it was 2 weeks ago that Camson told him that he was going to find the sword, and now he's here finding this, and I'm just like, yeah, I know. I just read that. Like, it's on the same page, girl. I know.
Yeah, it was 5 seconds ago. Also, can we talk about how annoying the sword name Blazing is?
I hate it.
Why is it not just Blaze?
I don't know. And also, whatever sword name that Winter has, I didn't like that name either, because I thought it was a person every time.
I fully didn't write it down because I was like, okay, I'm over these swords that have names. Like, oh my God.
Because they don't need names.
They don't need names. Anyway, we're still in the prologue, and next we see that Elka has indeed procured the Book of Riddles for Falcon, and they have fled.
It's fucking jarring. It's so weird. But we don't see that. We're just told it. And again, it's like, it was 6 months ago that Garrick warned me about this thing, and now it's happened.
Yeah.
It's so, like, just give me bullet points. Like,
yeah. Just give me the lore that I need to know in bullet points. That's great. So, remember, Elka was engaged to Winter, so she's left her fiancé with this foreigner. Worse, they have used a village to distract everybody from the fact that they're fleeing. Quote, the Summerlanders had raped and murdered dozens of villagers, then locked the rest in a meeting hall and burned them alive.
And also, reminder, these countries were not at war.
Right. It seems like kind of a lot.
You could have just run away in the dead of night, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also somehow Wintercraig are the bad guys. Let's be clear.
Yeah. Oh, I have thoughts about that when we get there. Anyway,
with a capital TH.
A capital TH. So Garrick has gone after them, and now Winter intends to go as well with his right-hand man, Valak. So as he and Valak are chasing after Garrick, who is chasing after Elka and Falcon, Winter calls to wolves with his magic and uses his weather gift to summon a storm to slow Falcon's flight. But midway, he finds the body of his brother Garrick and the friends Garrick took with him to pursue Falcon. This ends their immediate chase because Winter is in shock and in grief. Winter holds a vigil back at the palace for his brother's funeral pyre. When that's done, he goes to the temple the book was stolen from and intends to ask the goddess of Wyrn for special help to avenge his brother and his people. Whatever the task is, he must complete it naked and alone, and there's a high probability that he will die. And that's the end of the prologue. So, fuck, that's a lot.
This prologue was really long to the point that I kind of forgot it was a prologue, and I thought we were in the story. And so the fact that we didn't see this task, I was like, where is this book going?
It's really a shame that we don't have anybody on this podcast that doesn't read the prologue anymore, because this would have been really wild for them to not have read.
Oh my God, I didn't even think about that, but that... you would truly be lost.
Yeah, you'd be like, excuse me, what?
And this book doesn't really fill in a lot of those blanks. Like, for as weird as the time jumping in around here, it's, as prologues are, it's implied that you've read the prologue and now you know what's happening. It doesn't tell you again.
But I almost wish we hadn't gotten that much information about this, because
Me too.
there are so many moments later in the story, and I'll try to point them out if I remember to do so as they come up, that feel like they would have been a much more powerful gotcha or reveal if we didn't get all of this upfront information. And I feel like like not knowing would have made us more sympathetic to what some of the characters are acting like in the beginning of the book.
Yeah. Much better. Or much more sympathetic. It would have been much better is what I mean.
Yeah, specifically Camden and her loyalty to her brother. But we'll get there. Fast forward 3 years later, and we see Winter arriving in Vera Sola in Summerlee to deliver the terms of the Summerlander surrender. A bloody and brutal war has been waged between the two kingdoms over the past 3 years as a result of Falcon's actions, and Winter has used his power to plunge Summerland into basically a never-ending winter, starving them until the country was defeated.
Damn.
This power that Winter has, it is kind of a magnification of his winter weather gifts, and it's not giving away anything here because we learned pretty soon that he's swallowed something called the Ice Heart, and we'll get more information about what this is later, but it makes him like really powerful, like almost godlike. So Cam's nursemaid Tildy goes to tell Cam about Winter's arrival and finds her battling imaginary foes with her sword. Which would be fine if we ever came back to her using a sword in a meaningful way again, but we don't. And so this scene just makes her appear simple, in my opinion.
It also makes her feel younger, right? Like, this is a child?
Right.
This is a
despite
child.
the fact that she's 20.
Fully 20. I'm like, oh, cool, this is a 7-year-old. Got it.
Yeah. Because she's like, in her third-person limited internal monologue, she's like, the protagonist of a fairy tale, like battling dragons or whatever, and I'm just like, oh boy.
Yeah, like, and specifically I think Roland is like her that hero of the blazing sword.
The blazing.
Stupid. I hate it. I just also, the other thing I wanted to say is that even though the prologue gives us a lot of information, is also kind of delivered in like a weird way. Like, I think here it's reiterated, but her inner monologue says something like she had her brother's love too until he'd run off with the Winter King's bride. And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Which
like, we don't see
puts
that
it in
happen.
a weird comparison, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, Camson, the fuck is happening? Like, what?
I think you're confused about what a sibling should be.
I know.
Yeah. So Cam finishes her sword battle or whatever and runs up to the abandoned part of the castle to view the proceedings. We learn that she wasn't invited to attend the Winter King's arrival in person with the rest of her family because her father actually does hate her. So she must watch from the closed up part of the quarters of the castle that used to belong to her dead mother. As she watches the procession, she and Winter make eye contact from like 100 yards away or some shit, and he uses a power called the Gaze on her, thinking that she's a would-be assassin. The gaze essentially freezes people from the inside out, but because Cam is a child of the sun, her weather gifts help her survive for much longer than anyone else would, and the king releases her, believing her just to be an ordinary servant girl. The king is described thusly, quote, square jaw, cheekbones high and shapely, skin a surprisingly golden hue, the color of browned butter. She'd always thought the folk of Wintercraig would be snowy pale, but they weren't. At least he wasn't, which only made his wealth of long, gleaming white hair and startling pale eyes seem all the more vivid. He was handsome, beyond handsome.
Also, he is over 7 feet tall.
He's a giant.
It's not in this description, but I think I highlighted it. I did not make that up.
Okay, here's the thing. He is over 7 feet tall. I have no idea how tall everybody else is. Because though this book commits that cardinal sin of him being a fucking giant, we don't get imagery, at least in the first part of the book, of Camden being like petite. Or like, you know, her head coming up to his crotch when they stand. Or something ridiculous, you know?
That's true. And if you look at the cover, she is probably, if he's 7 feet tall, she's like 6'5".
At least, yeah.
So that's true. And so that does help the cardinal sin not feel weird if they're all giants.
Yeah, but why call it out then, you know?
I couldn't find the line. I thought I highlighted it. But yeah, why call it out? Why make him 7 feet tall?
It just seems like a weird choice.
Yeah.
So this is also a good description because, like, he's described as having the complexion of browned butter, which if you want to make the argument that that's tanned rather than brown, fine. I guess we brown butter differently. But it very clearly says long, gleaming white hair.
Yes, the long. And I do think that it is an interesting description because so often we get the icy blonde villain with the striking blue eyes who is pale, a la Draco Malfoy. And I do like that he is dark-skinned or darker-skinned because it does make for a very interesting character.
It does.
Physically.
And he's also not like the tall, dark, and handsome type, right? I feel like it's one or the other usually.
Yeah, and he's kind of got both.
Right. And then so it's here that we get the indication of how the rest of the book will unfold, specifically that it will be third person limited with depictions from both Cam and Winter. So that's how the book kind of alternates back and forth. And as we mentioned, like this part 1 covers chapters 1 through 7, but the chapters are very arbitrarily drawn, right? Like you get multiple switchbacks between perspectives within a chapter, and the chapters are long, like at least 30, 40 pages sometimes.
Yeah, which is really hard because I like to finish chapters before I like put a book down when I can. And I couldn't do that. And I also wanted to reward myself with fanfic by finishing chapters. And I was like, well, by the time I finished the chapter, I had to do something else. Like, I didn't have more time to read.
Right. It's also worth noting that there is like kind of a space break between those perspective shifts, which I appreciated. But at least on the Kindle version, it didn't always translate very well. So like sometimes you would like turn the page and that would eat up that space. And so you wouldn't necessarily realize that you had switched perspectives until like halfway down the next page.
Yeah, there were a couple times that I had to like flip back a page to be like, wait, who's talking? And see that. I like, because space breaks in a physical book are fine, but I like when there's like the 3 little asterisks or something to like denote that more clearly.
So you always see it in the digital form. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this yield perspective shift, we see Winter assessing the royal family. He has no use for the King of Summerland, who he sees as a fat and useless sack of shit. His daughters, though, the 3 seasons, are all lovely, and Winter remarks internally that any of them will do. Gross. For what? You can probably guess, but we'll get there more explicitly later.
Yep.
So Winter announces that the king will quarter Winter and his men, and that he wants to stay in the abandoned part of the castle, which puts the King of Summerland on the back foot, since that part is in literal ruins. Winter also demands a daughter accompany his dinner tonight, essentially to act as a guard against poisoned food and drink. While the castle snaps to that decision, Winter takes a tour of the city, essentially giving them like 6 hours to have his quarters ready to go.
They've just been abandoned.
Right.
It's also some insult to injury because the quarters that are abandoned are the queen's quarters, or were the deceased queen's quarters. So it's also kind of like, clear your shit out.
But they were also going to put him in like Falcon's old quarters, and I just like nobody thought that through.
That I know, and I think I don't know if that's in Camson's inner monologue, but that is like noted by someone that's like, that seems insulting.
Yeah.
Also, it's a palace. You don't have quarters that are like designated for guests?
For visiting emissaries, I guess.
Right. Weird.
So back to Cam. She's horrified that her mother's private place will be so defiled by the presence of a conquering hero. Speaking with Tildy, Cam rails against the injustice, but is chastised by Tildy, who's like, don't be an idiot. He could have us all killed. Cam determines that she has to go and get the treasures that remain from her mother before they are discarded. Tildy asks her to not be a blind fool and obstruct the path of peace that the king brings with him. Cam promises her, quote, I will not obstruct, but I won't help either.
Even though she can be like really childish, I do like Camson.
I do too. Like I like her more as the book goes on. She's like very straightforward, right? Like she doesn't, there's no subterfuge. Like she couldn't lie if her life depended on it, and it often does. Like she's just very pure of heart, I would say.
Yeah, but she's also really like blunt and upfront, which I like. Like she's not She's not pretending to be anyone she isn't, except for when she does do that.
But she's like, I guess that's the part that can come off a little bit simple, because like she's not the kind of person who suffers fools, and like she strikes me she wouldn't get sarcasm if that was the thing in this book, that kind of thing.
Yeah. We read another character that was similar to this, where I'm like, are you just very to the point, or is there a simpleness about you? And I can't remember what character it is, but
yeah, I can't either. But it's also like she's quick to action, and she's got a very strong like what's right and wrong sense, and she can come off as like impulsive almost.
Yes.
So as Kamsin leaves, Tildy chastens her, quote, "Don't fight so hard against the things you can't change, child. You'll batter yourself to death. Learn to change what you can and accept what you can't. Be the palm that bends into the wind to withstand the gale." And I think that's a very interesting thing to say to Cam, because as she even remarks internally, she is not the palm. She's more like a granite piece of stone. Like, she does not bend.
No, she does not bend. She would rather break.
Correct. So Cam looks out a window once she's alone and summons a storm to test and warn Winter that not all of the Summerlanders are as easily broken. As the rainstorm strengthens, Winter looks up and feels her power. He turns the storm into ice and dissipates it. He and his right hand Valak suspect that the person who's doing this is a princess, since the weather mage abilities only pass through the royal line. Back with Cam, the interaction and test of wills with Winter sent her physically reeling back against the stone wall, where she cracks her head. As she hurries to get her mother's things after this, she muses, quote, "For once, she was actually glad her father hadn't summoned her to join the family. No doubt the Winter King would be dining with them tonight, and after 2 run-ins with him, she would happily spend the rest of her life avoiding a third." I've seen foreshadowing before.
I've seen foreshadowing. Also, it's not explicitly stated, but like through her whole like not being called to be with the family, she's always like isolated. And it's confirmed later, but you do get the sense that no one knows that she's a princess, or not that no one knows, but it's not widely known that there are 4 daughters. Most people believe there are only 3 daughters. And I will say that this bugged me for a long time, because it gave me big Fourth Wing vibes, where I'm like, why does he hate her so much? Why does he hate her? And we do get an answer to that, which I think is a little bit of weak sauce, but a couple times I'm like, there's got to be a reason he's hiding her from the public. I need answers. Why does he hate her? Why does he hate her so fucking much?
It is interesting, too, because, like, in part 2, we'll get into this question of, like, fidelity. And I don't think it's giving anything away here to say that fidelity in the Summerlee court is, like, very rare. So it's a weird thing. The reason that her father hates her is kind of a weird thing for a king in that country.
Yeah, it is weird. And I still don't really feel like it's the full story.
Yeah, I don't either. Anyway, so Cam disguises herself as a maid and goes to the abandoned high tower. But she finds that it's already been turned over with new furniture and flooring and curtains and everything. There's like a bunch of people milling around. So panicked, she asks one of these people where the old things have gone, and she tries to play it off as being like a new maid for one of the seasons who asked for her mother's things. She learns that everything worth keeping was pushed into this other like solar room, but when she gets to that door, she finds it locked. So she determines to get the spare key from Tildy and return later. On her way out, she feels the eyes of Maud Newt, the mistress of servants, on her and prays that she hasn't been found out, as she knows that that would greatly displease her father. Okay, so this is point number 1 about this book, that editing could have gone a long way. She does that thing, the cardinal sin of going back to places multiple times, and we see it. Just tell me once, girl.
It's a lot. That bothered me. The other thing the question I had, kind of going back to her, like, being a secret, is I wish I had a clear understanding of who knew who she was and who doesn't. Because the other servants don't know who she is. I mean, she's in a disguise, but that's also confusing because she's got whack hair, and I just...
I never bought that just hiding your hair would, like, hide who you were from, like,
because it doesn't! It doesn't.
Like Clark Kent with just like glasses. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Well, and it's clear that at least like Maud knows who she is and like could pick her out of a crowd. So like who does know who she is? Because at that point you're talking about a conspiracy of people trying to keep her from the public knowledge, and I just don't believe that that's a thing.
No, because I don't understand why anyone else would be convinced to do that.
Well, and I just don't understand. I don't believe that if that was the case, that more than 5 people of the staff know. That would become gossip. Gossip would be reported eventually through spies to Winter's regime, right? And then, like, they would at least have to address the possibility that there might be a secret daughter running around, right? Like, that's just, I just don't believe that that wouldn't be a complete unknown.
No, but the only other option also doesn't make sense is the fact that they all know, and they just all know that the king hates her, but then Winter would know too that there's a hated daughter.
Right, exactly.
But but now I have more questions, right? Because I mean, this is kind of skipping ahead, but Tildy knows more and has shared more than she should, and so therefore, why didn't she tell the Winter King any of this?
Well, I think Tildy didn't tell the Winter King any of this because the Winter King was trying to do a twofer with like marrying a daughter, so getting a queen and then also removing a treasure. And if he knew that there was a hated daughter, he would have said, "And not that daughter you hate."
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay.
Anyway,
he's just doing all sorts of stuff. Anyway,
right.
Speaking out of turn.
So, just as Kamsin gets back to her chambers and changes out of the servant's garb, another guardsman summons her to her father's study. When she gets there, it becomes clear that her father knew that she summoned the storm and reprimands her with a slap to the face. Her other sisters are there, having been summoned to watch her punishment as they usually were. But this time they stand up for her sister and mollify their father. Her father warns her, though, that if she steps one hair out of line again, he will be extremely wroth, and she will regret it.
I feel like this is another cardinal sin where she has the same conversation with the same people multiple times. Yes. So I was going to say, is this the first time he threatens her with, like, death or banishment?
It is the first time, yes.
But it's not the last time.
No. Well, and it... The other cardinal sin is, like, making characters, like, very one note. So, like, the reason that I don't care to read about her sisters, and we know that the series follows her sisters, is that they stand here and watch her be abused, and it's not the first time. We're very clear about that. No. It's also not the first time that we read about, and they do nothing. Like, no. They're just like, oh, sister, they're there. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
And they're kind of like, Father, don't do
that.
That's not cool, man.
Right. And then when she gets beaten to within an inch of their life and they find that out, they're like, he would never do that. I'm like, you know he would do that.
You've seen him do that. Like,
right.
Okay, guys. And they're like, a curse will befall the kingdom. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Okay. Like, I almost wish that they had been mean sisters.
Yeah. Instead, they're Elaine.
They're Elaine. Yeah. Simple.
Yes.
Simple in a lot of ways.
Yep. And useless.
So anyway, back to Winter, who has finished touring the city and placing his guards at specific locations to discourage any rebelliousness. He arrives in the newly refurbished tower and begrudgingly finds it immaculately restored. He and Valak commiserate that they can't find fault. Valak goes on to try to dissuade Winter of his plans for the terms of peace, but Winter won't be moved. As Winter bathes alone before dinner, we learn something of what he intends. He says, quote, Summerlee had robbed him of both his queen and his heir. He planned to return the favor.
I do find it interesting that his brother was noted as his heir and not the child he was going to have with Elka.
Yeah. Well, I think it was probably like a stand-in thing, and then if he ever
had a child, it would have been that child. Which by her running away, then yeah.
But it is interesting to me that he never even, like, acknowledges a potential child with Elka.
Yeah.
So when dinner arrives, not one princess, but all 3 seasons accompany it and share a meal with Winter. He finds all 3 of them lovely and compliant, despite flashes of defiance in their eyes, as he taunts them by treating them more like servants rather than royal company. He remarks inwardly that truly any of them would do, which makes things considerably easier for him.
I will say that C.L. Wilson does an interesting job of creating him as a character because he's terrible. He's the fucking worst. But then I really like him in a couple chapters.
Yeah. Well, it feels like he's very much the begrudging aggressor. Like we'll talk about this more later on in the book, but it's like, you know, you could make the argument that he started the war and prolonged it for so long, but he was like very validly provoked into this and had to like defend himself, and he doesn't like being that person, but here we are.
Yeah, and then we'll learn more about his ice heart, which probably also makes him legitimately colder.
Yes.
And affects some of his emotions.
So when Winter meets with the Summer King later, King Verdon, he dismisses Verdon's advisors from the hearing of the terms of the treaty. When the last remaining general tries to get smart about this, Winter uses his gaze to cow the man. Eventually, Verdon asks his men to leave peacefully before the general can be frozen dead.
Oops.
Winter remarks inwardly that Summerlanders were all the same. Sheep, fatted and dull-witted by decades of self-indulgence, easily herded to the slaughter. He compares that to Roland, the hero Cam and her brother were so fond of, whom he describes as a lion of a man who sacrificed everything so that Summerlee could live free.
Interesting.
Winter goes on to tell Verdon that the price of peace is, quote, a queen, a treasure, and an heir, end quote. Essentially, he requires one of Verdon's daughters as a bride, and she will have a year to bear him an heir, otherwise he'll kill her and come back for another one. Winter's intent is to double dip on the queen and treasure part, since Verdon dotes on his seasons.
You just explained that to me because I literally was like, cool, so he's got a queen and he's going to get an heir, but what's the treasure? But
as I was making my notes, I was like, what is the treasure? What am I missing? Oh, got it.
Oh, the child is the treasure.
The child.
The child
no,
bride
I think
is
the daughter
treasure.
is the
it's
child
the daughter.
bride.
That's what I meant. The child of the king. Yes.
The child bride. No, she's not a child. Okay.
She's like 25.
Fully a consenting adult. It's fine.
Yes. But I was waiting for there to be like a treasure.
I know, me too. Like, give me your crown jewels, literally.
Yeah, or like some other book of riddles. I don't know.
Right. Give me the blazing. I know you have it.
I know you have it.
So back to Cam, who is sneaking into the tower with the key to the solar or whatever.
We're back.
So, okay, we're back to this place, and I wish we had just missed the first scene entirely.
Just
Once
tell me
inside,
she's there. Yeah, tell me she's already inside.
Tell me, have her think about the first time she showed up and glad that she's now here and no one's there and there's a key and she's got plenty of time to look for her shit. Done. That's easily eliminated like 20 pages that I didn't care to read the first time around.
Because that's the thing. You are very succinct at driving these, but reminder, this book is almost 600 pages long. Like, to get this far, we've covered like 60 pages.
Yeah, it really did not need to be this long. That's one of my primary sources of critique for it.
Yes.
So once inside the solar, Cam finds what she's looking for, but as she goes to leave, Winter and Valak come back earlier than she expected. She thinks that she hears Valak leave and Winter go into the bathroom to bathe again, so she uses the opportunity to try and bolt. But of course she's caught. Winter initially thinks her an assassin again, and even remarks outwardly that she's far too pretty for such an ugly profession. But when she doesn't have the hand-to-hand combat skills of an assassin, nor the smooth cover stories for why she's in his chambers, he begins to doubt his initial appraisal.
I do like getting his perspective of that and kind of clocking, like, because she looks around for an exit and he's like, if she was an assassin, she would already have that mapped out. Also, she can't lie for shit.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like going through the thought process.
He's like, why are you here? She's like, I put linens in your bath. And he's like, you didn't come from my bath.
Like, my bathroom is over there.
It's over there. She's like, He's like, oh boy. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Clearly
okay.
not an assassin. Got it.
You sweet summer child, literally.
Literally. So he orders Valak to search her, and when he gets to her pockets, he has to hold his sword at her throat to keep her compliant. Finding the treasures of her mother, Winter thinks her a common thief. But Cam spits back that even if she were a thief, it would be better than being a cold, merciless killer like Winter.
Woof.
As Valak and Winter kind of let their guard down a little, realizing that she's just a thief and not anything more than that, Cam makes a break for it, but Winter catches her and pushes her against the wall. When he does this, the cap that she's wearing falls off, and he recognizes her as the servant girl he almost froze to death when he arrived.
Whoops. Because again, she's got weird fucking hair. If they don't have purple eyes, they have weird fucking hair.
Yeah. Purple eyes, weird hair, all over the place. But her eyes aren't purple. She's got silver eyes.
Of course she does.
Yeah. So this close to her, Winter begins to feel a draw toward Cam. His blood heats, and he realizes that he wants to get to know her. Biblically. But then he goes on to fondle her and can tell that she's feeling similar despite her protests to the contrary. Even Valak is like, wow, this is wildly inappropriate. Winter, can you stop, please?
Yeah, like, this bro, stop groping her.
Yeah, this is not cool. But Winter just growls at him, shocking just about everyone in the room.
Poor Valak. Just like, bro, get it together.
But this just escalates things because Winter then kisses Cam really hard, and this causes Cam to summon weather magic to break the windows in the room, causing enough of a distraction that Winter lets her go to defend himself against would-be attackers. And, like, just, my God, what a scene.
Why? Is there a fated mates thing in here? Like, what is happening? And okay, we'll talk about this also when we get to the only sex scene in this part. I appreciate that we get both perspectives, where even later we'll get Cam's, and Cam is like, there was something about him. So it wasn't all rapey. But in Winter's inner monologue, he's like, I'm not a rapist. And then he proceeds to be real rapey.
Yeah, and he even remarks, he's like, if her mouth was as compliant as her body seemed to be, I would probably just fuck her right now. And I'm like, okay, buddy.
And I feel like Valak is just like, bro, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. So, I don't think it's giving anything away here to say that, like, Winter is part of a wolf clan, and he has, like, wolf-like attributes. Like, he has heightened ability to, like, smell and see and things like that. Later on, he will admit that the reason that he has this, like, attraction to her is because his wolf, like, spirit person inside of him recognizes her as his mate. So it is, like, kind of a fated mates thing.
Okay.
But that's his experience. She feels the same way, and I have no idea why.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. Because I did know about the wolfy attributes, so that's interesting. But yeah, I don't know why she also has this, like, hunger for him.
Yeah, because it's electric. And I think, to your point, like, getting both of those perspectives is necessary to make me okay with what's going to happen in this first part.
Yeah, because I was getting real concernicus.
Mm-hmm.
And even in this scene, I was like, I don't want anywhere that this is going.
No, I do not want. That's not okay. Thank you.
But then almost immediately we get Campson, and she's like, ooh, what was that?
Yeah. So Cam is, like, running from these guys, right? And she's, like, distracted because she's, like, horny as fuck. Because
she's
was,
all
like,
hot and bothered.
really into it. Yeah. And I think she even says something to the effect of, like, the only reason she was saying no is because, like, she was very aware of who he is and who she is and, like, how much trouble that would be for her.
Yeah. Kind of like the principle of the thing, like, I'm going to say no, but, like, she wouldn't want to say no.
Yeah. If it was literally anybody else, she would have been like, okay.
Let's go.
Yeah. But, so she doesn't make it very far before running smack into Maud Newt, who knows exactly who she is. And when Winter comes running out after Cam, it's clear to Maud that something untoward had happened between the two because they're both, like, kind of disheveled and, like, they have the swollen lip thing going on and they're both breathing hard, that kind of thing.
And he unbuttoned, like, most of her top.
Yes.
Like, it talks about how her top is, like, unbuttoned to, like, below her boobs.
Yeah. So Winter asks who Cam is, but Maud doesn't give him a straight answer. Instead, she just hauls Cam off to her father immediately. So before we see Cam's fate, we see Winter and Valak debriefing on what the fuck just happened.
Yeah, you horn dog.
Yeah, Valak's like, brother, that is
Keep
not
it in
okay.
your fucking pants.
Right.
It's not okay.
Winter admits that he's never felt that way about anyone before. He describes it as feeling, quote, driven, possessive, enchanted almost. Like there was a fire in his soul when he touched Cam. Valak suggests that maybe the season spiked his drink with a drug called Eris, which is a powerful and infamous aphrodisiac known to the region. But they both dismiss this. Winter is ashamed that he couldn't master himself with Cam and asks Valak whether he thinks the ice heart has already consumed him. But Valak assures him that it has not. So back to Cam. Maud is dismissed after telling Verdon what Cam was up to. Verdon is irate because he thinks that Cam has sought to undermine their peace in some way. Cam admits that she was going after her mother's things after her father pushes her. The 2 remaining items that she has, her father takes from her and burns them in his hands. He tells her that she had no right to defile her mother's things. He backhands her across the face, leaving a rose imprinted on her cheek from his signet ring. He tells Cam, quote, she was the one thing I loved most in this world, and you took her from me, you and your cursed gifts. Cam protests that she was a child, and her father counters that she was a mistake. He tells her that he has suffered her for 20 years, but he will suffer no longer. He gives her a choice, death or banishment. He takes her to a windowless stone room deep in the castle and canes her until she agrees to marry the Winter King. Because she's so strong-willed, it took her father and others completely ruining her back until she was bloody and defeated for her to agree.
It's dark in here.
So dark in here.
Also, if your queen was the thing you loved most in the world, why would you burn her portrait and her journal? Wouldn't you want those?
Yeah. So like I said, like fidelity, as we learn later, is kind of an oddity in Summerlee. And so it's weird that he has such like a powerful attachment to her mother when that's like not culturally a thing. The second thing is like, it's weird that he doesn't spend time in the mother's private quarters. Like it would be another thing if like he kept them pristine and didn't know that Cam spent time there and like felt betrayed in that way somehow.
Yeah.
But for him to just like shut it up and out and just let those stuff go to waste like that, I don't know. It just seems like kind of a juxtaposition.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
But that's the reason that we have for now. So Cam is dragged back to her room where Tildy is sick about her condition. The guards who brought her there ask for forgiveness, but Cam waves them off, saying it's not their fault. As Tildy cleans her back, she feels the restorative power of the sun finally reaching her, speeding along her healing. Tildy declares that Verdon has called a curse upon his house for what he did to Cam, his own flesh and blood. So it's something to be called out here. Cam is some kind of magical thing. Like I know you and I were texting about this before, but like when we first started reading this book, it's not clear if these people are just like straight up human or like some kind of fae, but their magic definitely is tied to the weather patterns. And like when Cam is in direct sunlight and in contact with like lightning, she heals like way faster.
I have a lot of questions about their magic. I think it is pretty well handled. I just have more questions about it.
Yeah, I do too. Like, I just wish we got some. I really the reason that I have so many questions is because I'm trying to put it into a category of things, and I wish that it had just been like explicitly said, like they're witches, right? Or they're
or they're fae,
whatever.
or they're
right.
Yeah, and they call her like a weather witch, and they kind of call her a witch, but not framed in the way that we understand witches in other books.
Yeah. So even though she's closer to the sun and the healing is sped up, she's still like not going to be ready to do anything for several weeks. And as she's kind of realizing how much of a bad way she's in, Cam is resigned to having deserved the beating for killing her mother.
Oof.
We learn that when she was young, she summoned a storm that caused a widowmaker to fall on her mother and kill her. But Tildy tells Cam that before she was even conceived, doctors told her mother and Verdon that they shouldn't have more kids, but they both decided to ignore that advice. Cam tells her that it doesn't matter anyway because she's leaving. Her father wants her wed and gone within 2 days.
I had the note that this is why we need birth control. Because Tildy says something like, it's not you he hates himself because he couldn't stay away from your mother. I was like, well, if we had birth control in this world, they could...
Or family planning of any kind.
Yeah, then they could bone all they want. Because the answer shouldn't be like, oh, I can never touch my wife. Like, what?
Right. Like, brother, just pull out. Have some kind of like, I mean, I know that's not like the best like birth control. You know what I mean, right?
But there's options. There are things you could do. Instead, it was like, don't have more kids. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go stick my dick in her.
Yeah. So back to Winter, who's been informed that Verdon has accepted the terms of surrender with the condition that Winter will consummate the marriage the night of the wedding and leave the next day.
Gross.
Yeah, very gross.
Wetter
Winter tells
better.
Valak that he accepts and that he's ready for them to be home. Valak protests that he should stay and lead the occupying force in Verasola, but Winter denies him that, opting to keep Valak close and leave the occupation work to a man named Chief Lieutenant Lyric. Valak sees this as somewhat of an insult before Winter tells him that it's because he cares too much about him to leave him behind.
It's his only friend.
Before Valak leaves to implement Winter's word, Winter asks about the maid, but Valak hasn't found anything more about her and tells Winter to push her from his mind. Despite this, Winter can't keep his mind away from Cam.
Because he wants this little servant girl.
Yes. The next day, the marriage contract is drawn up and signed separately. Winter sees the name for his betrothed for the first time. Quote, Her Royal Highness Angelica Mariposa Rosalind Camson Gianna Coruscate. Which means nothing to him.
No, because he only knows the seasons by their seasonal names.
Exactly. So he asks which season that is, but Verdon just retorts, does it matter?
It's really, does it?
And Winter's pride won't let him push the matter further, so he doesn't know.
So she impersonates Autumn. Does he just assume it's Autumn? At one point, she's never like introduced as Autumn, is she? Or just because
No.
only spring and summer are there, so she's the one missing?
Right.
Process of elimination.
Process of elimination, and there's not a fourth daughter, so they lead him to believe that it is Autumn.
Gross.
Yeah. Very gross.
I love Verdon. I do really like, I don't like Verdon. I like Valak. But I like the retort of like, does it matter which one?
Yeah. Does it really matter? Yeah. As Winter gets ready for the ceremony, Valak can tell that Winter is still thinking about the servant girl, Cam, and cautions him to put him from her mind. He tells him that it will be easier to do this once he spends a few hours with his new bride that evening. Gross. Then we see Tildy arguing with Verdon, who is not happy that Cam isn't better healed by now. Tildy says that she's a healer, not a miracle worker, and she's trying to undo all of the damage that, she reminds Verdon, he did. They're both afraid that Cam won't even be able to stand through the ceremony, and so they concoct a plan to have one of her sisters stand in for her, heavily veiled, and then swap Cam in for the consummation bit. But Cam won't have that. This is her choice now, and she will honor it. They desperately want to get this deal done before Winter realizes he's not getting a season, but a discarded, unloved daughter instead. Tildy asks how Verdon can be so heartless against his own daughter, and he tells her, quote, She murdered my Rose. I don't just hate her. I loathe the very air she breathes. But Daddy, I love him.
But Daddy, I love him. Well, no one loves you.
Oof.
Stark and
So as Tildy gets Cam ready for the wedding, Tildy impresses upon her the direness of her situation, fooling a conquering king. There's a chance that once Winter finds out that he was duped, he will kill Cam on the spot.
Well,
Tildy tells Cam that if that doesn't happen, Wintercraig is the safest place for Cam to be until Falcon returns because she will be away from the wrath of her father. So, okay, fine. But this threat that Winter would kill Cam on the spot never really felt like a valid threat because we know that he's already obsessed with her.
right. I know. I was never worried about that either. And then later when they're traveling and we get the like, he's going to kill you. I'm like, no, he's fucking not.
Yeah. Like,
No,
I
he's
just...
not.
It's tough because I appreciate books that happen from both perspectives. But on the other hand, it's almost like you're giving me too much information and like you're undermining some of your own plot points there because this angst is just like unfounded in my opinion.
Exactly. And I mean, like, I guess it's kind of where that miscommunication comes in because like Cam doesn't know how obsessed he is, but we do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, so you're kind of double dipping on like the mutual pining at that point because they're both just like, I wish that they loved me, but they don't. So I must never show my feelings. And it's just like, oh boy.
Oh boy, but like just now kiss.
Now kiss. Yeah.
But they also have zero chill. So like
No. They have zero chill, and it's like after they have zero chill, like both of them are thinking like maybe like they feel that way about me outside of the bedroom, and then like they'll have a bad day and they'll be like, no, they just hate me like everyone else. It's like, God damn it.
They're deeply wounded people.
Truly.
Like everyone else.
So Tildy goes on to tell Cam that Falcon is looking for Blazing, and that surprises Cam, but it also makes a couple things click into place for her, like why Falcon was sent to Wintercraig in the first place. She realizes her father must be in on this plot for Blazing, etc. She also realizes that Elka had to have helped Falcon steal the Book of Riddles. She tells us, quote, like everyone else, when told the story of Falcon's falling in love and eloping with the Winter King's bride, she'd accepted it without question. But also, like, I have a huge question about this, because how do people just accept that at face value when it resulted in a war?
Right. Because, like, yeah, it's one thing to lose your betrothed to run away, but, like, a 3-year war when you were in, like, peace negotiations, like, that seems kind of petty to me. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah. Well, and I just, like... Even if the story that you're told at face value is like Falcon fell in love and eloped with the Winter King's bride, like if I'm Cam, I'd be like, bro, you know better. Like, what the fuck were you thinking?
Yeah, like there's gotta be more to this.
And especially since Falcon just fucked off and like was not a part of this war at all, like I would be mad at that.
And that's suspicious to me because like, where did you go? Why
Where
would
did
you
you
not
go?
return the conquering hero or whatever?
Why would you not come back and help us defend our lands? And now we're like being subjugated by this dude that you wronged. Like, we're totally cleaning up your messes and it sucks.
And what makes me so curious, so like she has the assumption that her father isn't on the plot, but her father never mentions Falcon. So like, is there a bigger plot, or is Falcon just greedy and has his own plans?
Yeah, I wonder about that too. And like fully being 75% of the way through the book, I can't tell you. I don't know.
I really hope we find out and that's not just like a weird plot device that we never come back to.
Yeah, same. So Tildy goes on to say that she suspects that Winter's honor will prevent him from killing Cam once he uncovers her true identity. She knows this because she has been feeding the Winter Court information as a turncoat for the past 6 months.
Whoop. There it is.
Specifically, she's the one that suggested that the Winter King could end the war in a different way than utter annihilation. And she's also the one that told them about the abandoned quarters that belonged to the late queen. She's been plotting this whole time to get Cam away from her father to relative safety. Cam is shocked and horrified, but is blinded by her loyalty to her country. She accuses Tildy, quote, "You're the one who convinced King Verdon that I should be the Winter King's bride. You're the reason he took me into the mountain and beat me until I agreed to this marriage. Why? Am I really such a monster? All these years I thought you loved me. Has that been a lie too?" But Tildy says that she had no idea that her father would do that to Cam.
Why?
And that she did everything for love of Cam and her mother.
Okay, so like I believe the rest of what Tildy says, that she was genuinely trying to help Kildy. That she was genuinely trying to help. I do believe what Tildy is saying, that she was genuinely trying to help Cam and that she did have like her best interests. But just like her sisters, I don't know how any of them could be like, I didn't know he was going to hit you.
Yeah, and like I think Tildy is trying to walk that line of like, I didn't think that he would go that far, but like, it's clear that he hates her. Like, I just don't understand how you would take that chance, you know? There had to have been a better way.
Well, and even Tildy says, like, you have to go because he will kill you. So, like, you're fully acknowledging that he's going to kill her.
Well, yeah, and after, because Tildy, like, the Winter King's, like, staff has not been discreet about asking about the servant girl. So I don't believe that Tildy doesn't know that, like, Cam made an impression on the Winter King. I think she says something to that effect. Like, oh, I had to make sure that you two would be, like, good together because, like, that was the whole ploy to get Cam sent into the quarters, that whole thing. But
yeah,
she could have just said, Winter King, come here. I'm your spy. This is the person you're marrying. Can we, like, speed this along because she's in a lot of pain? Like, you could have just ended that.
Yeah, I don't know why he goes on for so long, especially with the whole like, well, the Winter King might just kill you on the spot for deceit. And I'm like, but
But he won't.
but he won't though. And
Yeah.
even if it was like, okay, so take the whole deceit like out of it, or okay, take his affection for Cam out of it. I don't think he would have killed one of the princesses. I think he always would have taken it out on Verdon and like, that's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't see him just like slaughtering his new bride because she lied.
Well, and they try to make this a thing later, but it's like, you know, Cam was complicit in the lie. And I'm like, Cam was trying to survive. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it was either be complicit or die. But they're like, oh, but you're a liar, blah, blah. And it's like, okay.
There was literally no other choice, but cool. Yeah, blame me. Blame
Yeah,
the victim.
great. Black and white. Right. Blame the victim. Awesome. Love that for me.
Love that for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I just, it does bother me in books like this where there's just like no appreciation of like gray area.
Yeah.
So after this conversation, it's clear that Tildy and Cam's relationship is damaged, potentially beyond repair, and Cam tells her to veil her heavily so that she can attend her own wedding. She says, quote, "The only thing I require from you is your herbalist skills to mix up a fresh ointment for my back. You will find a way to block out the worst of the pain, and I'll find a way to make it through this farce," end quote.
Other than that, get the fuck out.
Right. And as far as I know, that's the last conversation that she and Tildy have.
I think so, because then Tildy just sort of like packs up and leaves, which was interesting
Yeah.
because I thought Tildy would go back to Wintercraig with them.
I thought she would too, but it seems like this conversation kind of made that choice for her because it was clear that Cam was like not down with what Tildy did. But it's
Yeah.
weird to me that she just disappears.
Yeah, because then where does she go?
Yeah.
And she seems kind of like a loose cannon.
Kind of a bad loose end to have. Yeah, especially if the king, Verdon, didn't ever find out who the spy was in his midst. Because in one of the conversations he has with Cam, he accuses her of being the traitor that he knows about. So he knows
Yeah.
that he's got a leak somewhere.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Anyway, I'll be interested to see if Tildy comes back because she still is. She does figure in Cam's internal monologue at the very least, but she doesn't actually make an appearance.
Interesting.
At least 75% of the way through. So next we see Winter waiting for his bride, who is 30 minutes late to their wedding. But just as he's about to do something about it, she appears. She's dressed and perfumed like her sister Autumn, and so that's who Winter thinks she is. When she reaches him at the altar, he reaches for the veil, but is reminded that she doesn't want to be embarrassed by the ruddiness of her cheeks at her wedding, the story being that she's cried so much about having to marry him. Winter tells his bride, quote, "Willingly or not, Autumn, you have consented to be my wife. I will have what I want from you, but this marriage doesn't have to be a battle unless you make it so. Remember that."
Which seems to be advice that Cam gets a lot.
Yeah, right?
Don't make it harder than it needs to be, girl.
Right. Though she's trembling from the pain of her injuries, she whispers that she understands. And as the ceremony begins, it's clear to Winter that his bride-to-be is unwell, and he asks her about it. But she tells him, look, I'm just dizzy. I haven't eaten all day. And so Winter kind of gives the priest the high sign to hurry up, and this surprises Cam because she's like, oh, he likes
cares.
me, or at least is considerate of me, which the bar is in hell.
The bar is in hell.
Like, Jesus, girl. When the priest gets to the part where he asks who gives Cam in marriage, her father steps forward and says, quote, "I, Verdon Coruscant, King of Summerlee, give this woman, her Royal Highness Angelica Mariposa Rosalind Camson Gianna Coruscant, a princess of Summerlee and an heir to the summer throne by grant of patrimony," end quote. And this is important because it's the first time in her entire life that Cam's father officially recognized her as his daughter. She and Winter exchange vows and reveal the birthmarks they both have on their wrists that mark them as true heirs to their respective thrones. As they press their hands and wrists together rather than a kiss, energy erupts from them, causing thunder and lightning to blow out the candles in the room and break some of the windows. Whoops. In this exchange, Cam falls to the ground and Winter attends to her with seemingly genuine concern. And Cam is grateful, but wary. He helps her back up and then escorts her to their celebratory dinner.
So there is something in her that also recognizes and responds to him. I just don't know what it is or why.
Yeah, like it's clear because whenever they touch, there's like a jolt of electricity. There's like a warming in the stomach. There's like butterflies. There's like this draw to each other. And it's kind of annoying because Cam just doesn't ask a goddamn follow-up question. She's like, that's weird. Anyway.
She doesn't. She doesn't.
I mean, neither does he, but
No, not really. I mean, he does more than her, where he's like, this is very strange. Because he clocks it later, which we'll get to, when he like runs into the real Autumn, and he's like, where's the electricity?
right. And Cam really thinks about it more from just like a, man, I wish I could think straight when I'm near him.
Yeah, because it's kind of all chaos in my loins.
Right. Which I could kind of get, like, her, because if she's like truly been so like isolated her entire life, maybe she just doesn't know that that's unreal.
Yeah, that's true. And we don't get any background of her having any relations with anyone else ever.
Right. Well, she is a virgin on her wedding night, so
Yes.
that's important.
That is important.
So at dinner, Winter commands Cam to eat, so she lifts her veil just enough to do so, though she eats very little because the pain suppressants that she's taken have turned her stomach. Winter finds that he has no taste for the way that Summerlander celebrates, and he just wants the whole thing to be over, so he announces that he and his bride will retire. But before they leave, Verdon says it's customary for them to share a drink. Wary of his motives, Winter makes Verdon drink him at first, and when he's fine, seemingly, Winter and Cam both drink the rest. Then Cam goes with her sisters to prepare to be bedded.
Yeah.
They go to Autumn's room, which has been heavily perfumed, and Autumn herself has worn Cam's night clothes and rolled around in the bed to make the ruse more convincing. But as they prepare her, Cam finds that her pain is almost gone. Whatever was in the wine seems to be working well. She feels warm, sweaty even.
And ready to like run a mile.
Yeah, she's like, whoa, I have so much energy. Let's go. I feel better than I haven't dazed.
Yeah.
As her sisters dress her and put ointment on her back, they see the horror their father inflicted upon her for the first time. Her sisters say she can't possibly go through with sex in her condition, but Cam is like, old news, move on, let's go, I've got a cock to ride. And her sisters weep as they continue and apologize. But Cam tells them she doesn't blame any of them and not worry about her.
Something in here that it kind of gave me the ick is that I understand they're trying to make the room smell like Autumn. But Autumn is wearing her, like, wedding lingerie, essentially, and then Cam puts it on, and that just kind of grossed me out.
This whole thing gives me the ick. Like, I don't like the idea of, like, my sisters helping me. Like, I don't know. I don't have siblings, so maybe this is a different thing, but...
No, I don't have sisters, but it seems weird.
Very intimate.
And then if I was Autumn, this poor girl, they're going to be fucking in her bed all night. Like, this is her room. Like, her actual room.
Yeah, the one that she has to live in after this.
After they fuck in her bed.
Well, so, okay, the other thing that gives me the ick is, like, this is one of the times when her sisters are like, oh my god, I can't believe our father did this. And I'm like, really, girl? But also, they're in on the fact that Cam and Winter have been drugged with Eris leaf, which is that aphrodisiac. And so they look at her back and they all look at each other. They're like, fuck, she's just been drugged and she's going to get railed tonight. But she's, like, very injured.
Like, very
just
injured.
leave her there.
The whole thing is fucking wild. Like,
Yeah.
they're terrible. They're terrible.
Great looking out for your sister, I guess.
Yeah.
So they leave, and Cam realizes that that's why she feels amazing. It's because of the Eris leaf. And then we switch back to Winter, and he knows it too because he's got a raging hard-on for no reason. When he gets to Autumn's room, he dismisses his guard and sloppily goes to his bride. It's dark, and so he can't properly see her, and they're both much more concerned with getting off thanks to the Eris leaf than they are about, like, inspecting each other's faces and identities. Yep. As they couple, their weather mage abilities start to manifest, and, quote, lightning seared the sky. Thunder shook the earth with a tremendous booming crash. Just as it had at the wedding, a wild, storming rush of air swept through the open windows, snuffing every candle and plunging the room into darkness, end quote.
I'm really glad we didn't get a lot of detail in this scene because they were both drugged, and I didn't want to read about that.
They're both drugged, and it was, like, the the deception of it didn't feel good, especially since it was like Cam's first time. And like they're both into it. They both have this magnetic attraction, whatever, but like they're not in control of themselves. He doesn't even know who he's fucking, right? He thinks she's someone else. Like there's just the situation is gray at best.
Yeah. And I am glad that we get the before, during, and after, we get the comments that even outside of the Eris sleeve, they were just into it because of that magnetic attraction. But I didn't want to read details, so I'm glad we didn't get a lot of details.
Yeah, we do get some details about, like, you know, him touching her chest and kissing her and that kind of thing, but that's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
So in the wee hours of the morning, Cam's sisters spirit her away to prolong the ruse even further. They take her back to her rooms and agree to stand watch to help her back heal as much as possible before she leaves. So, okay, and then this is wild because they set up what are essentially described as heat lamps to speed the process along, which is kind of a wild detail because, like, what fucking century are we in?
The only way that this was, like, because it's fucking weird, and they call them growing lamps, which was also wild to me. The only way that I was able to like wrap my head around this is that if she gets her power from the sun, these had to be like UV lamps, and it's like sunlight.
Right, but they don't have cars and shit. How do they have UV lamps?
No, and everything else is lit by candles. So what do these lights run on? But they don't run on like electricity, right? Because later they use these lamps like in the tents. So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what these are. Do they run on magic? Do they run on some weird battery pack that we're just not going to talk about?
Well, and it's like the only bit of advanced technology we ever see. And so it's just like, I would prefer that they just set a chaise on her balcony and like stuck her in the sun. Like she's a plant, right?
She's a plant.
And she, like, travels with these lamps. So, like, they keep coming up. And every time they're brought up, I'm just like, what if we harness the power of this technology to do other things? Right? How has that thought not crossed anybody's mind?
Because also, twice in one evening, all of the candles have blown out and left them in darkness. We don't think to use the lamps for light. No. God forbid.
Right. Yeah.
And it just seems unnecessary. Like, because then if she gets her power from the sun, and if they all get their power from the sun, why don't they just carry around like flashlights?
Girl. Yeah.
It is a wild detail, and I had to just blow past it because the more I think about it, the more it bugs me.
I had to ignore it. It's a prime example of you're giving me far too much information that I don't need. That's just leaving. It's just I'm hung up on this thing
on these
now.
lamps. And it's weird too because like we also get a lot of detail on like the salves and like the potions, so to speak, and those things. So like I didn't need this. She's already being treated.
Yeah.
I just
anyway.
I don't know.
So back with Winter, he's awake and irritated because he's alone. Even more so after the drugged stupor of their night. He remarks, quote, he would not tolerate arrogance. He would not tolerate defiance, and he would definitely not tolerate rejection from his bride. She would come when he called and stay until he bid her go, end quote. Okay.
But also, I don't know why they didn't think the fact that sneaking around in the middle of the night would piss him off. They were so worried about him slaughtering her that, like, you didn't think this was going to make him mad?
I just don't understand what the difference is between him slaughtering her in the castle and slaughtering her in, like, the carriage, like, 50 miles away from the castle would be. Like, either way, he's still close enough to make your life miserable. So, like, just rip the Band-Aid off, in my opinion.
Well, and even Kamsen says that, where she's like, I'm hoping he doesn't find out until we're beyond the gates or whatever. And I'm like, you think he's just not going to turn around? Like, he's going to be too inconvenienced to go back?
He makes storms.
I know.
Made Summerly winter for 3 years.
God forbid he turn around in 3 days. Like,
yeah, just examine that thought process a little bit more, please.
It doesn't, like, the morning after should have been the reveal. I understand the deception leading up to it, but like, or from the get-go, you should have been honest and like, oh, you want my prize child? Here's the one that I keep out of the public light because she's so valuable.
Right. But don't look at her until you get home because I beat the shit out of her and you can't know.
I only beat the things I love.
Right. That would be more convincing, right?
Right.
But like, this is especially heinous because this book, to its credit, does the damsel in distress thing really well, and it fucking had me by the balls.
Yep.
But this entire first part is damsel in distress, and I just wanted the who hurt you moment so bad, and I wanted it to be that morning, and then they spirit her away, and I'm like, God damn it, guys!
I know, because it would have been perfect that morning, and like, we're getting to it. It's a very slow roll into the who hurt you. And I do kind of like the cookie crumbs we get of him like building his like concern and rage and all these things about it. But I wanted it to be
a lot.
It's a lot.
I know, I wanted it to be now.
Give it to me now.
So he rises from bed and he realizes that there's like a lot of dried blood on the bed, like more than just like you took somebody's hymen apart with your dick. And he's seized with the horror that not only did he potentially not service his bride appropriately, but he hurt her like badly. Like the blood is his fault.
Like attacked her? Yeah.
And so he's determined to find his bride, find out if he hurt her, and make amends if he did. So he finds Autumn in a remote part of the palace, and she seems fine and also horrified to see him. She's not wearing her wedding ring, which sets Winter off. But he asks if he hurt her, and she says that he didn't, that she has a wound on her back. And he asks not a follow-up question. He's like, cool, not me. He then leans in to kiss her, and she turns her cheek, and that's when he smells her. He realizes that he doesn't smell himself on her, which he finds offensive and odd. But there's also something odd about the way that she smells. It doesn't quite match the way that she, quote-unquote, smelled the night before. So, annoyed and enraged that she has seemingly denied him so soon after their marriage, he tells her that they leave within the hour and to get her ass ready.
One thing I don't like that Winter does repeatedly is he leaves. He just leaves. He frequently says a thing and fucking leaves.
That doesn't go away. Sorry.
It's so annoying to me. Like, we're getting to it, but I'm going to leave. And he does it here. He does it in the carriage. He's like, no, I'm not riding with you. Nah. And then he does it in the tent where he's just like, I'm going to get food. Nah. And then she's going for bed. And he's like, I'm going to go. Nah. And we're just like, just stay. Just like 4 seconds. It's weird.
I'm going to go. You're so right.
He does it all the time. It's his default. He's like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to go.
That's my NPC default. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So after this interaction, Autumn goes to Cam and tells her that Cam's got to get the fuck out of this marriage because Winter is like not a cool dude. He's a brute. When she tells Cam that Winter tried to kiss her, Cam feels jealousy that she doesn't understand. It's hot under her skin, so much so that she burns an imprint of her hand into the brush that she's holding with her magical abilities.
So it's not just storms.
Correct. Autumn goes on to say that Winter was making sure that he didn't hurt her and also to make sure that he was good to her the night before. And Cam feels shitty about this because, in her words, quote, he'd worried that he'd wounded her. He'd set her on fire, showered her with gifts after senseless gift of pleasure, shattered and remade her time and time again in a crucible of devastating ecstasy. And he worried that he'd been too rough. She deceived him, was deceiving him still, and he, the supposedly heartless Iceman from the north, had come to make sure he had neither harmed nor disappointed her on their wedding night. Because he's a teddy bear.
Because he's a teddy bear. I loved his concern that, and he tells the true Autumn that too, where like, not only did you want to make sure he didn't hurt her, but he wanted to make sure she was fulfilled. And that endeared him to me a lot.
Yeah, he's like, it was good for you, right?
Right.
It was good for you, right? I did that thing for you.
And
Cool.
then Cam is like, yeah, you fucking rocked my world.
I rocked my socks.
It was amazing. Seems like a generous lover.
Very generous and giving lover with a lot of stamina.
Oh, yeah.
So Autumn bemoans that it should have been her, that she should have willingly wed Winter. And I'm like, yeah, girl, because you knew what your dad was. Fine. You know what? Winter,
could have
you're a useless sack of
volunteered.
shit. Could have. Spare your sister any hardship. But no, okay, it's fine.
Papa.
But
no.
Cam tells her that it was her choice, that she's always dreamed of being like Roland, who saved Summerlee. Autumn points out that Roland died.
I think Cam is like, well, maybe that was not the best example. Shut the fuck up, Autumn.
Yeah, you're not helping, okay?
Also, why are you walking around? You should be sequestered somewhere.
Truly, like, what if you just run into your supposed? I mean, come on, that's exactly what happened.
That's
like,
exactly
she should have been
what
kept
happened.
somewhere.
Yeah, why are you out and about?
So in the courtyard of the palace, Winter and Cam prepare to leave. Verdon is there to see them off and embraces a heavily veiled Cam. He whispers to her, quote, "Enjoy your life. What's left of it?" And I'm like,
Ugh.
dude, just leave it alone.
Right, move on.
Winter is clearly peeved that Cam is veiled again, but pleased that she wears his ring. He takes her hand, and a familiar flash of energy that was distinctly absent with Autumn earlier sparks between them. He notices as well the small bruises on Cam's wrists from the night before, something that was also absent with Autumn. He brings her hand to his mouth to kiss it and smells her. And when he does, he realizes that something is amiss and snatches the veil from her head. Recognizing her as the servant girl who's been driving him nuts and giving him the bluest of balls, he grabs her by the throat and pulls her close, demanding to know who she is. But she just tells him that she is Princess Camzin and his wife.
Damn.
Yeah. So obviously their departure is delayed while they debrief in Verdon's office. Winter accuses Verdon of deception, but Verdon tells Winter that he did not specify which of his daughters he was to wed. Winter accuses Cam of being a bastard, but Verdon remarks that he wishes that she had been, because if that were the case, his wife would still be alive.
Oof, buddy.
Dude, I know!
Let it fucking go.
Cam elaborates by saying, quote, "He blames me, you see, for my mother's death. He couldn't banish me outright, so instead he kept me confined to a remote part of the palace, away from the court and away from him. Then you came." And I read that, I was like, yeah, he did.
Yeah, you
Sorry.
did.
I'm so sorry.
That's great. I love that, actually. Then we came.
So Winter summons Cam to his side to get a better look at her. He smells the herbs on her again, and he cuts the dress off her back to reveal her wounds. When he's looked enough, he turns her back to face him and says, quote, "I will not ask who beat you. As he signed his work, there is no need." Which I think is the best "who hurt you" I've ever read in my entire fucking life.
It hands down is. I squealed audibly,
Yeah.
and a lot of what I hated was immediately forgiven.
Yeah. Same.
And it holds up. And holy shit, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. Like,
He signed
I think that's
his
why
work. Ugh.
he signed his work. I think that's why this book is such a contradiction, because there's so much about it that, like, on its own, I would just be like, hard pass, like DNF. But then there's things like this where I'm just like reading at the top of my lungs to like eat it up. Like, I'm just here for it.
Yeah. Oh, and this whole scene, like, I wanted it to happen in the morning in bed, but like, it's so well executed, and like everything that happens next is so well executed.
This is better. I'm glad we waited.
better.
Like, it was a painful
too.
process to get here, but it's way better.
It's so good. And there was so much focus on her back that I'd honestly forgotten about like the rose burn on her face.
Yeah.
That, like, to bring that back around, like, oh, so good. So good.
So before he sends her to get into more comfortable clothes for their journey, he asks her under his breath, "Was marriage to me such a terrible fate that this was the better option?"
Well, you'll make it up to me in bed, right?
Right? But Camzin doesn't get to answer. She's just taken away by her sisters to get in more comfortable clothes for their journey. So when Winter is alone with Verdon, he tells Verdon that he made a mistake because now Cam is Winter's wife. And because of his culture, he must seek justice for crimes committed against her. So he can't kill Verdon outright. So instead, he takes Ferdinand's hand with the signet on it and freezes it off with his ice powers.
His whole arm.
Yeah. Which was pretty badass. Better yet, so he meets Cam outside, and she asks if her father's still alive, and he's like, oh yeah, he's alive, but he's never going to raise his hand to anyone again.
Or at all.
Because he doesn't have it anymore.
It was metal as fuck, because we get like a very clear
Yeah.
description of like watching his arm turn to ice.
And the screaming, and
The screaming.
the
And the
painting, and
shrieking
all of it.
which is
Yeah.
so great. And he even does that like cold, ruthless, like killer thing where he's like, because she lives, you get to live, but I'm still gonna do this like eye for an eye. So you lose the
Right.
hand that you used to hurt her. Oh
Yes.
so good.
Oh, it
It's
slaps.
so good.
Oh, it hits so good.
It is so good. Oh.
So Cam says her goodbyes to her sisters, and they are off. Cam travels with a new maid named Bella, and she's a little deflated that she won't be riding with Winter. She'll be in a carriage, and Winter will be on a horse. She thought perhaps that the passion that they shared the night before would gain her some kind of warmth from Winter, but pushes that thought away immediately, reminding herself that this is a political marriage and nothing more.
Yeah, okay.
Each hour as they travel, Bella applies a salve to Cam's back for her wounds. It's grueling, and Cam is made sick by the movement of the carriage. She's annoyed by the incessant chattering of Bella, and she realizes just how bleak the situation is when they make a rest stop, and she's faced with the reality that there will be no inn for their host to stay at along the way, and it will take them a fortnight to get to their destination, Gildenheim in Wintercraig.
So, a few things. One, I was worried here because I was like, okay, is this book one big fucking travel montage? Because like I don't want to read about that. But two, there's a continuity error that I must point out because it very much bothered me. So
Please.
they stop here for this rest, and what's his name, Valak?
Yeah.
She Bella says like, oh, if you want privacy, like you should go out in the fields because all the men are like going to piss that way apparently. And Cam is like, no, I'll just wait till we get to an inn. And Valak is like, yeah, we're not gonna stop at an inn, so if you're gonna do the thing. So she's talking to Valak, and we get this description of him that says his blue eyes darker than Winter's but just as piercing. Cool. Then in the same chapter, 10 pages later, we're talking to Valak again, and it says his eyes were a pale blue, but nowhere near as icy as the Winter King's. Are they dark or are they pale?
Oh, I missed that completely. Good call
Like-
out, though.
Darker than Winter's. Pale blue, but not icy. So, like, I guess they could still be pale, but, like, don't use the word dark and pale to describe the same man's eyes.
Right, and compare him to the same other man.
Yeah, so I was just like, ooh, I didn't like that. And
Yeah,
I went back
but-
to make sure she was talking about the same person. She is.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to point out about this specific scene is I call out them stopping once. They actually stopped, like, I think a couple of times before the night. And I'm just like, do we have to watch every single one of them? Because, like, up until this point, we've been seeing the days unfold as the day goes by, which is another cardinal sin. And we eventually do get away from that a little bit. But this book, we could have spent so much little time experiencing this, and I would have been fine with it.
Because we could have just fast forwarded to them stopping for the night, and then I just get the information that, like, the ride was grueling, she got car sick, carriage sick. Like, you could have given me all that without showing me that. Because I think they stopped, like, 2 or 3 times. So the first time she's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not going to pee. I'll wait. I'm too proud. Then the second time she has to pee and throw up. And then they stop, like, another time.
Right. And each time they're like, oh, I think my shit pile is just like right over there. We didn't move very far, right? And it's just like, okay, we could have, this doesn't have to be an entire chapter to itself.
No. Because nothing really happens. Like, even the conversation
No.
that we're about to talk about with Bella, like, I could have gotten that any other time. Again, they're traveling for a fortnight. And that's where I was like, you're going to show me 2 weeks every single fucking day of this. And Winter's not there, so you're not building. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not building any, like, angst. There's even parts of this that I left out completely. Like, there's some gifts from her sisters, and, like, one of her sisters gave her birds, and she, like, feeds those birds, and those birds end up dying because it's too fucking cold. And it's just like, I don't care.
I don't care.
Oh, my God, I don't care.
It also made her sisters seem so simple again. And even Winter acknowledges that, like, these are all gonna fucking die. Like, what dumb girls.
Yeah, like, for people who are supposed to be very highly educated, they don't act like it.
No. They're dumb dummies.
So, along this way, it's clear that Bella dislikes Wintermen, and she holds pretty particular prejudicial views about them, despite Cam pointing out that they just look like men to her. Bella's like, they're barbarians. You'll see as soon as we cross the border, they'll rip their clothes off and subject
Dance
us or something
naked.
like that.
Yeah, it's fucking weird.
Right. So then Bella divulges to Cam that she overheard that Winter intends to kill Cam within a year if she doesn't produce him an heir. Specifically, he'll send her to the mercy of the mountains. Whatever that means. Cam wrestles with this new information because it seems so at odds with the man that she's encountered so far. One who is concerned with her pleasure in bed. One whom Tildy was convinced was an honorable man at heart. She forces herself to stop spiraling, though, because she can't make sense of it. She doesn't have enough information. So because the weather is poor, and mostly because Cam is unwell, Winter halts the progression earlier than intended. They've barely made it out of eyesight from Verisola. And that's not great. No. Everybody realizes that this is not an ideal outcome. Cam is shown into her in Winter's tent and is surprised to find it opulent and cozy. When she is joined by Winter, he forces her to eat, though her stomach lurches at the thought. She forces down her soup. He tells her that the center of her magic is familiar and knows that it was her who challenged him on the first day that he arrived. They finish the meal in silence, and Cam finds that the more she watches Winter, the hornier she gets. Though he can smell it on her, she tells him that the only thing she needs is a good night's rest on a bed that isn't moving.
Undisturbed.
No rockin'. So Bella is summoned to ready her for bed while Winter goes to check on the men or some shit. He just leaves again.
He just leaves.
And when they are alone, Bella applies salve to Cam's back. Cam resolves to herself then and there, quote, because no matter what it took, Camson had no intention of letting any man, husband, king, or the sun god himself, stake her out on a glacier and leave her to die, end quote. And I have to say, that was a really strong way to end the chapter. Except in the beginning of the next chapter, which will start part 2, it is immediately undermined.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So
I was worried.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't be fooled, gentle reader.
Okay.
But that is where we're going to stop for part 2. Sorry, part 1. We're in part 1. We're stopping part 1 here. Yep, and we'll pick right back up in part 2, starting with chapter 8. But yeah, it is, it's wild. If you think to yourself, where's the plot? Girl, you're not going to find her for a while.
If maybe at all, because we're not sure.
Maybe at all. Yeah. The plot is the angst between those two, I think.
I think so too. Which is fine, and I think I'm here for it. I think what bothers me is that why are we taking so long to get here then? If that's the whole plot, why are we giving me all this? Because then why do I have the whole thing about Falcon and Elka and Roland, like, and Blazing and all of that shit? Because what you're telling me is that this is a series, but it doesn't follow her anymore. So all that shit better come true in this book, unless that whole Falcon Blazing thing is the running thread through the whole series, and I'm not here for that.
Yeah. I mean, it might be the case where, you know, she pulls a Sarah J. Maas and she fits like a whole fuck ton of information and stuff into the last quarter of the book, but I kind of doubt it. I mean, we'll see, I guess.
We'll see. Well, it's giving me, and this is just because of what it's fresh in my head, because we just talked about it, but it's giving me big, like, Sarah J. Maas vibes with the whole thing of, like, Jurian and those other two fuckers that I don't give a shit about. That, like, you're telling me, but, like, I don't know why they matter.
Yeah, very much that.
Like, we started here. I don't know. I don't see how it's going to come back into play. And you are telling me that you're 75% through and it still hasn't really come back into play?
No. I will say that, like, I'm still having a great time because the damsel in distress vibes continue, and you're like, how many different ways can she be a damsel in distress? Like, you'd be surprised. So
I'm here
it's
for
a
it.
good time. It's just a little meandering, and it doesn't need to be 600 pages, but
600 pages
alas.
is a lot. But alas.
Yeah.
And alack.
So we'll end part 1 there. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope that you join us for part 2 in 2 weeks. Let us know what you think about this book and about our coverage on it. You can find us on the socials at Spice Traders Pod, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Goodreads. And hey, if you like our podcast and want more, consider becoming a patron where we release Patreon exclusive episodes on our off weeks. And if you really, really like us, consider dropping us a review wherever you listen. Until next time, we'll see ya.
Bye.